Today we're going to do Banaras by Kedarnath Singh, translated into English by Nidhi Singh. Kedarnath Singh was a poet, critic, and essayist of Hindi literature. He received the Jnanpith Award, Hindi's highest literary honor, in 2013. His anthologies include Abhi Bilkul Abhi, Yahan Se Dekho, Zameen Pak Rahi Hai, Akarmi Saras, and Bhag. He was also awarded the Sahitya Academy Award in 1989 in Hindi for his poetry collection Akal Mein Saras, meaning trains in drought. Now, what is special about the poem Banaras? Banaras is full of contradictions or paradoxes. And what is a paradox? A paradox is a figure of speech where two contradictory things come together, but it is true also at the same time. I'll give you an example. Suppose I love Facebook. I love Facebook so much that I have become addicted to it, and now I have started hating it. So I hate Facebook because I love it. So this is an example for paradox where two contradictory things or concepts come together. The theme of this poem is about the preserved tradition and myth of Banaras. Though modernity has arrived in Banaras, the signature tradition and conservative nature of Banaras has remained. And on one hand, Kedarnath Singh is illustrating the aura of Banaras through this poem. There have been many stories regarding the effects of this poem on various readers. Once, as Kedarnath ji recited the poem in America, a woman actually started crying, remembering the antiquity, mystique, and spirituality of the city of Banaras. Manglesh Dabral also confirms in one of his interviews that someone from Gujarat had actually changed his intention to commit suicide on reading this poem. The poem was originally written in the dialect Khadi Boli, and as I have already told you, it has been translated into English by Nidhi Singh. Banaras is also known as Varanasi and is situated in Uttar Pradesh. Banaras is located on the banks of the river Ganga or Ganges. As a city, it is quite famous for its religious associations, and it is also considered as the holiest among the 7 holy cities in India. The poem begins with saying that spring suddenly descends on the city. Spring is a symbol of hope, and religion is also a symbol of hope. This is why Shelley says, if winter comes, can spring be far behind? It is indeed religion that endows people with some kind of hope. So, when spring descends on the city, a whirl of dust rises from Lehartara and Manduwadi. Lehartara and Manduwadi are the two places, and the significance of Lehartara is that it is famous for its religious and cultural significance. And there is also a lake by the same name a short distance away from the Kabir Math. It is said that the infant Kabir was found floating on a lotus flower here, and Niru Nima, the mother of Kabir, brought him home. Modern historical studies also say that Kabir was born into a recently converted family of Muslim weavers. Kabir was critical of both religious attitudes. So, Kabir is a symbol of contradiction in this poem because Kabir was associated with both Muslim and Hindu religions, and yet he was critical of both. So, Kabir is the first paradox that we find in this poem. And the second one is the place Manduwadi. What is special about Manduwadi? It has all the characteristics of an urban area, but it has not been recognized as a town officially. So it falls under the category of census town. In India, a census town is one which is not statutorily notified and administered as a town, but nevertheless whose population has attained urban characteristics, meaning it is not classified as a town even though the people and certain features have the characteristics of a city. And the poet says that dust rises and coats the tongue of this ancient place. The city of Banaras is personified, and the bank of the river Ganga is portrayed as its tongue. The significance of this comparison is that just like the bank of the river, the tongue is both dry and moist. So, another symbol, you call it a liminal symbol, that is neither here nor there and seemingly contradictory. So, the tongue again functions as a liminal symbol that is neither here nor there. The tongue of the city is the river bank that is moist and therefore it easily catches dust. And when spring descends here, life begins to quiver because spring comes after winter and winter is a sign of death and stillness. So once spring comes here, everything that has life starts to quiver and everything that does not have life begins to sprout, meaning seeds, and it grows. And the poet states that, and at the Dashashwamedh, the last stone on the river bank softens even more. And the last stone from the steps that descend onto the river starts to soften. The Dashashwamedh is a ghat in Banaras that is reminiscent of both Brahma and Shiva. So the Dashashwamedh is also a paradoxical symbol because Shiva is a destroyer and Brahma is a creator. And the ghat that descends into the river is called the Dashashwamedh here. And it says that even the last stone on the river bank is soft. Naturally, this last stone on the river bank becomes softened owing to the moisture here. But what the poet implies here that even the most stone-hearted person who comes into this ancient religious and spiritual city finds himself being softened because the ambience of the city is so. And you can find that there's a strange glow in the eyes of the monkeys crouching on the stairs, and a strange sheen fills the emptiness of the beggars' bowls. You can find the holiness of the city being reflected in a soft glow, even in the eyes of the monkeys. And also you find the soft light or a halo like sheen in the bowls of the beggars. The poet exclaims, have you ever seen spring descending on empty bowls? So there are two implications here. The first is that the beauty of spring descends on these balls. Secondly, the mercy shown by the ones depositing money inside these balls seem like spring after winter to many hungry stomachs. So they say, this is how this city opens up. It fills up empties and day after day. So this is how the city opens up as it fills up empty stomachs and fills empty souls with optimism or hope. And day after day, shoulders carry the weight of an eternal corpse through its dark and winding streets towards the shimmering Ganges. Day after day, shoulders carry weight of a corpse, it says. What is the connection between corpses and the city is that in the Hindu religion, it is believed that if the dead person is cremated and his ashes immersed in the Ganga, the person will attain moksha or salvation. This is why we have the reference of the shoulders day by day carrying the corpse here, because the changes also becomes associated with the symbol of death because of this constant immersion immersion of ashes into it. Dust kicks up slowly, so slowly. Bells ring slowly, so slowly. Dusk sets in, and people trudge the lanes of the city slowly, so slowly. This slowness, this rhythm binds the city, and for hundreds of years nothing falls off, nothing shakes, nothing moves. It is said that the dust kicks up slowly and everything is so slow. The poet again here refers to the slowness of the city in terms of its lack of change. We normally say that something is progressing when it is capable of change or when an event happens over a short period of time. Here, slowness is synonymous with tradition and the mythical nature of Banaras. The phrase so slow is repeated again and again to show that the unchanged tradition that the city has been harboring for a long time. Though it has become a city and modernity has arrived there, the slowness that characterizes the city is paradoxical. Because what is significant about modern life is that it is a fast forward life. And what is significant regarding the city of Banaras is that though it is a modern city, nothing has changed over the city. Basically, the pulse and the vibes of the city and its religious and mythical nature does not change. So Banaras, on the whole, stands as a paradox as it is modern and yet it is conservative. The tradition is very carefully preserved in this modern city. It is said that people trudge or walk with heavy steps because of the exhaustion as they have come to Varanasi to get alleviated from the miseries of life. It is this rhythm of slowness that binds the city together. The slowness is synonymous with tradition that holds everything together. It holds everything united in place because tradition, unlike modernity, has the ability to hold everything together. One example will be the traditional example of the joint family as opposed to the scattered nuclear families. And it says that the boat that has been tied stays for 100 of years. The boat that has been tied is a metaphor for the city that is strongly tied to to its tradition and myth. The Ganges remains, the boat stays tied to a spot, and for hundreds of years at the same place, the Sabo of Tulsidas remains. As I've already told you, the boat is a metaphor for the city that is strongly tied to its tradition and myth. And for 100 of years, you can find the Sabo. Sabo was a traditional wooden shoe worn generally by sages and other people. So, this wooden shoe of Tulsidas remains in the same place. And what is significant about Tulsidas is that he was the first great Hindi poet to write in praise of Varanasi. And The poet says, if you look at the city from the river bank one evening by the light of the Aarti, it has a strange shape. It is submerged, half in water, half in flowers, half in mantra, half in death, half in sleep, half in conch shell. If you look again, its half remains and half does not. What remains stands on its own, and what does not stands on columns of ashes and light, columns of fire, of water, of smoke, of scent, of the raised arms of man. The poet states that if one looks at it from the river bank, one can see a strange shape as though the city is submerged. It is half in water and half outside water. So the shape of the city you can see is also in liminality. It is neither here nor there. It is half in water, half in flowers used for worship, half in mantra, and half in conch shell. The sacred conch shell is an integral part of the Hindu symbolic and religious tradition, and God Vishnu is always portrayed holding the conch in his right hand. According to many believers, the blowing of a conch shell enhances positive psychological vibrations such as courage, hope, optimism, and willpower. So while half the city is in hope, the other half is not and have come to the city in search of hope. The conch shell is therefore a symbol of religiosity. And the poet states that if you look again, one half remains and the other does not. The half marked by tradition and religiosity remains, and the other half marked by modernity does not. For it is the religious and conservative side that actually gives this place its identity. And what remains the religious side strong in devotion, it stands on its own. And the side that is not strong from within has to take the support of ritualistic practices. It has to take the support of columns of ashes and light, columns of fire, of water, of smoke, of scent, of the raised arms of man. Columns of ashes and smoke, meaning meaning artis. Columns of fire, meaning yagnas and pujas. Of water, meaning the changes. Of scent, meaning agarbatis. Of the raised arms of man means the man standing in reverence in his puja. In the original Hindi, the word used for column was kamba, meaning pillar or support. So, what the poet implies here is that the kind of devotion that is not spiritually strong from within has to take the external support of ritualistic practices. Here, Kedarnath Singh is actually criticizing external ritualistic practices like Kabir did. To quote Kedarnath himself, I have based the tradition of Kabir in my poetry, not the mythological tradition of Banaras. But at the same time, I do not reject the magic or hypnosis in Banaras. I have had a dissonant tone towards the root and orthodox side of the daily life of Banaras. So you can see that Kedarnath Singh was strongly influenced by Kabir's philosophy, and Kabir also had rejected the hypocrisy and misguided rituals that was evident in various religious practices of his day, including both Islam and Hinduism. Now, coming to the final stanza, in the final stanza, the city is beautifully personified as an ascetic standing on one leg in penance, praying to the unseen sun. And for centuries now, praying to the unseen sun, the city has stood in the water on one leg, completely oblivious to the other. The unseen sun is a beautiful metaphor for God, the center of the universe. The two legs of the city are modernity and tradition. So the city, it stands on its leg of tradition and myth. That is its very signature or identity, and it is conspicuous in its presence. It does not require the other leg of modernity, and it is oblivious or unaware of the same. This is a beautiful imagery that is employed there. And on another level, the poet seems to echo that spiritual devotion does not require the other leg of ritualistic practices. So the poem ends with this beautiful visual imagery highlighting the twin aspects of the city and emphasizing the paradoxical nature of the city itself. And finally, we find that the approach that the poet Kedarnath Singh adopts to this poem is also paradoxical. For you can find that as he is praising the city, he also criticizes it in the same vein. To quote Kedarnath again, this poem of mine acknowledges the splendor and hypnosis of Banaras while pointing a finger at many negative aspects. So you can find that the approach to the poem itself is paradoxical in nature. And finally, Kedarnath Singh himself was a paradox because it is said that while he never did avoid tradition, he never caught the fever of modernity also. Okay, so that's all for today. Thank you.